All right, it's rare for me to finish a game and then immediately return and set it back up again. Usually, I finish a game and I'm so keen to move on to something else. I've got the potato Dresden being clipped over here, really keen to move on to that. But Eric Lee Smith's Battle Hymn Gettysburg was fascinating, and having finished it, I am so keen just to set it straight back up and run through it again, and to, I guess, employ some of the lessons that I learned from my first run through. So, in particular, the Confederates are going to be much more careful in their advance. They are going to not rush into events. They are going to try to bring entire divisions into action simultaneously, rather than just the sort of one by one attacks that I often saw. And they're going to try to pick off and isolate some of those Union defenders. They're going to pick the terrain they fight over more carefully. The Union are going to do exactly what they did in the last time around. They're going to stick to the heights, stick to the good defensive terrain, and they're going to withdraw. Now, messing with all those plans are going to be the combat chip activation draws. I think that was very critical, and it's great from a solo perspective to see how those things happen, and to see how the Union evaded combat. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. So I'm here at the start of the first turn. It's just on 7 a.m. and we have Heath's division about to drive down this Chambersburg pike towards Buford's cavalry. I will report back soon on this second run through and let you know how it goes. Alright, it's the end of the first turn. No surprises here, just 4 activations. Heath's men have moved on straight up the map. Reynolds is arriving from down south, and the cavalry is just holding their ground. They did not move at all. This is good defensive terrain out here on the left. Gamble is in Herbst Woods, Caliph in the middle, and Devon out on the right. Yeah, they'll see how they go holding that ground there. And then 2 combat turns, US artillery fired to no effect this time around, and nothing for the Confederates to do. So that's the end of the first turn. It's right on 8:15 a.m. Okay, it's in turn 2, and Heath's division has very quickly cleared off Buford's dismounted cavalry. Some devastating fire against, who was it, Devon's brigade and Caliph's artillery. They tried to pull back Caliph's horse artillery. They failed. And both of those brigades were shattered, you can see over here. In the process, Devon also suffered 2 strength point losses. So not a good start for the Union. As a result, Gamble's brigade has really pulled back to Seminary Ridge, trying to just slow down the Confederates. Reynolds' corps is not far away. But for now, it's just a single cavalry brigade holding off Heath's division. Not a great start for the Union, but again, we'll see how we go and see what the order of activations are. This is the activation order for this turn. So you can see Heath moved up, and then almost immediately afterwards, the Confederate combat turn, which let them attack straight away. And this is really critical, getting that order of activations as they need it before the cavalry can activate and pull back. Boom, boom, done. All right, so that's the end of the second turn, 8:15. Actually, sorry, no, it's around 9:30 a.m. now. All right, the end of the third turn. It is on 10:45 a.m. and once again, check out this order of activations. So the Confederate Artillery Reserve moved up, Heath's division moved up. They surrounded, who was it left? Gamble's brigade around here. And then they had their combat turn straight afterwards, and they shattered Gamble's surrounded brigade. Now, when an enemy unit is surrounded by zones of control, the attackers get a +2 dice roll modifier to their attacks. which was very effective and quickly cleared off those Union dismounted cavalry defenders, and Archer and Davis moved up onto the heights. And then you get the Union activations to follow, and there's not much they can do at this stage. You can see the Iron Brigade and Cutler moving into the area, but now they're in very poor defensive positions. They're in open ground. Cutler didn't have enough movement to get up into the woods. They've seized, I guess, the high ground and the roads, and they're hoping to get an early activation next turn. The rest of Reynolds' infantry are moving up Emmetsburg Road in the south, but the Confederates are doing much better this time around than they were last time. Having said that, Archer has 1 effective strength point remaining. He's 3 minus 2 demoralised. Davis has been reduced. His full strength is 8. He's lost 3 strength points partly, I think, approach fire. No demoralisation yet from Davis. Just small hits, a few unlucky results in combat. Again, I think approach fire. So, Confederates doing well. The chip activation is certainly playing a large role there. And I guess the Union rushing to try and think about where they'll defend. They may have to pull back through Gettysburg far earlier than they had hoped. Pleasanton's cavalry corps is gone for the rest of the day by the 3rd turn. All right, I'll report back soon. Okay, it's now the end of the 4th turn, and some very interesting back and forth developments along Seminary Ridge. So Reynolds' 1st Corps had first activation, which enabled the Iron Brigade to move up into this wooded area here, good defensive terrain, where they were only at the time facing, I think it was maybe Pettigrew down here. But then Heath, they were hoping to get a combat activation then, but then Heath activated immediately after and brought in some more of his division to really outnumber the Iron Brigade. Sort of approach fire markers on either side. And then, of course, the Confederate artillery moved up McIntosh and Pegram. And then Pleasanton, they're gone. The US had their combat turn. And at this point, the Iron Brigade decided just to pull back, that they were outnumbered in this combat 16, 17, 18, 19 to 6, outnumbered about 3 to 1. That's basically 19 dice rolling against their 3 dice. Their 6 dice, sorry. And they didn't like their chances. So they've just pulled back into open terrain, which is a bit dangerous. Actually, sorry, when they retreat from combat, they have to move back 2 spaces. So they're back there, which is probably a bit better because this is a more solid Union defensive line. So they retreated before combat on their combat activation marker. Howard's men moving up on the Confederate combat turn. They fired some artillery, which didn't have any effect. And then Pender's division, which you can see here, moving up as reinforcements. So the Union have been forced back partly off the north side of Seminary Ridge, the base of Oak Hill. And they're in open ground, but they have a decent defensive line. The Confederates just need to be careful not to overexpose themselves in that attack, as they did last time I played this. We'll see how they go. All right, I'll report back soon. All right, it's the end of the 5th turn. It is just on 1:15 p.m. and this was quite a long turn. I'll just show you the order of activations here. So Heath's division moved up in the centre. Howard's corps, I'm trying to remember the back and forth that happened. So Heath's men moved up here. Howard's men didn't do a great deal. They've shifted around to the right of what was Reynolds' line. Then we had the US combat turn, and nothing really happened there. Reynolds' men then activated, and they launched an attack on some of these isolated, well, not necessarily isolated, but sort of advanced elements of what was at the time Heath's division and the artillery reserve, Confederate artillery reserve down here. It was a bold move. You can see they've crossed over here, moved over Seminary Ridge. They had enough movement. Biddle came in from the right down here. And it was looking like a good offensive line of Reynolds' corps. But then Pender activated, and they brought their men in. So Lane was brought in, a full-strength Lane, a full-strength Pettigrew, Pettigrew was already there. We brought in, I think, maybe Thomas and Scales. Perrin was brought in as well. He's been shattered. The artillery reserve then pulled back away from the line, thinking they didn't want to experience any losses. And then we had the Confederate combat turn, and there was a massive series of one big engagement, really, along the line here. The result of which saw, I think the net result was 2 of maybe 3 of Reynolds's brigades were shattered. I think they had one there, and one there. Just looking over here, I think it saw Baxter, Paul, and Stone shattered. No strength point losses, which is pretty significant. It's important. But they did lose a lot of morale. On the other hand, Brockenbrough, who was already pretty weak, lost a strength point and then was shattered. And Perrin was shattered as well due to demoralisation. A lot of the remaining Confederate units have also suffered losses. Davis is down to 4 strength points, -1 down to 3. Pettigrew suffered in that combat, 1 strength point, 3 morale, and he had to retreat. Archer down to 1, he didn't move, he stayed there. I'm not sure. I don't think these guys got involved. Sorry, they moved up behind Pender's men. And of those remaining Union forces, Cutler down to 5, the Iron Brigade down to 5. I don't think Howard. Well, maybe he was involved. But I guess this is the Union saw as an opportunity to strike at the time weak Confederate right flank. That was not a big force there, but just upset their drive on Gettysburg, and it certainly forced them away from this area. But they've also opened up this centre area. I guess in the process, however, the Union have suffered those shattered brigades that I mentioned. It was a big series of back and forth fighting in that area. It's now the end of the 5th turn. It's 1:15 p.m. and Rhodes's division is about to arrive down here, and the Union is now not in a great position to hold in this area. They would love to be able to pull back there. I don't think Howard's going to defend in this area. They may have to pull straight back through Gettysburg onto the heights. I think I'll wait and see what the order of activations is going to be. All right, that's the end of the turn. All right, it's around 2:30 p.m, the end of the 6th turn. And a pretty quiet turn this turn. Nothing really happened. You can see the order of activations here. So first of all, Pender's division activated, but they're already at strength 4. Lane has been reduced down to 2 effective strength points, and there's a pretty strong Union line along here. Just with their high morale modifiers, this is the Iron Brigade. Cutler's still quite strong. Artillery over in the east, and they were just a bit scared about confronting that line head on. Heath's division activated not too long afterwards, but they're again also very heavily reduced, Archer down to 1 and so forth. So they decided just to wait for Rhodes's division to arrive, and that was the very last thing to happen in this turn. There was an exchange of artillery fire, but no real effect. And then Rhodes came on the board, and as you can see here, they're driving towards Howard's men. That was about it. So after a furious 5th turn, this is a very quiet 6th turn, with both armies really reeling from their losses in those combats earlier and afraid to engage. Okay, so it's about 2:30 p.m. Right, it's the end of the 7th turn. It is 3:45 p.m, and now the Union have decided to withdraw through Gettysburg. They, with their losses already suffered, and Early's division and Rose's division pushing up from the northeast, it is too much for the Union to be able to stand Confederate numerical superiority here at the moment. So they basically have to pull back and tighten up their lines. Reynolds's corps activated first, so they were pulling back behind Howard's division, and then a few combat activation chits were drawn. Not much happened there in combat. Then Rhodes pushed up alongside Howard's men. Howard's men then pulled back even further. They can't. It's very slow moving through this town, so they couldn't pull back too far. That's about as far as they could get. So there's still this opportunity for Early and Rhodes to pounce on those men and force them into combat. That's really what the Confederates want to do with this numerical superiority, is pin down those Union defenders before they can withdraw, and they weren't able to do so this turn. And then Heath had the final activation, and they've just moved up. Yes, they're weak, but I mean, Garnett's artillery is fresh and can help out, and Davis and Pettigrew can still threaten those Union positions. All right, so that's the situation at the end of the 7th turn. All right, we're at the end of the 8th turn. It's about 5 p.m, and as you can see, this was a devastating turn. Basically what happened is Rhodes' division activated first. They charged up to those Union defences, a combination of Howard's and Reynolds' corps. They outnumbered the defenders, and so decided to use their initiative to send in their combat activation. And they just had superiority of forces. Howard's men couldn't really do much damage against Rhodes' division. Rhodes, in all the fighting there, we lost Dulles' brigade, but have a look now at shattered Union units. A few strength point losses, yes, but mostly just demoralisation. All of them passed their morale checks, so they're okay. But the Iron Brigade is gone, Baxter's brigade is gone. Having Rhodes activate first before the Union could pull back onto the high ground was critical, and getting that numerical superiority to, in effect, roll more dice, cause more hits on the enemy. So this is over here. Daniel's brigade did have to retreat. They suffered one hit and had to retreat. Ramseur is here, but then Early activated later on, in fact immediately afterwards, and they moved in. They're just at the foot of Culp's Hill. The Union forces all sort of activated towards the end here, so they've pulled back around Culp's Hill, Cemetery Ridge, but they are very weak. Even Pender is moving up straight on Cemetery Ridge around to the right here. We've got two Union artillery batteries in the front line. This is the Union defensive line here. It's not looking good for the Union. There are still 3 more turns to go in the day, but I really don't think... we'll have more of Slocum's men coming up from the road out here in the east, but yeah, this is playing very differently to the last time I played through this. And again, I've utilised those lessons, so the Confederates are attacking as entire divisions rather than as individual brigades. The Union is trying to pull back, and maybe they should have pulled back earlier instead of sort of this counterattack here on Seminary Ridge. That was probably a bit silly in hindsight. It certainly slowed them down around here, but then Rhodes and Early hitting from the east has been just devastating. All right, so that's the end of the 8th turn. It's now on 5 p.m. All right, it's around 6:15 p.m. It's the end of the 9 o'clock turn, and as you can see in the middle here, the Confederates briefly moved up onto Cemetery Ridge, eliminating some of Howard's cavalry and shattering one of Reynolds' brigades. They did manage to move up into the area, but they were subsequently shattered in a second round of combat. But they do control these two. They control these two hexes here on Cemetery Ridge, and that is what they need to do to secure victory at the end of the first day. If they can retain control of those two hexes, by the end of the 11th turn, they win victory on this first day. So there's 2 turns to go. We're heading into the 10th turn now. This means it's really going to be a race for these 2 hexes, and there'll be more fighting around this area. You can see Slocum's Corps coming in from the southeast. This cavalry here has suffered demoralisation. Rhodes's division is quite heavily demoralised. You can see O'Neill back here on 1 effective strength point. That's Iverson with 1 point. Ramseur has... I think that's a mistake. I meant to put a 3 there, not a 1. He lost 1 strength point in that combat. He's down to 3 minus 1 is 2 strength points. But, and in fact, early lost 2 brigades in combat. So just give you a look at the casualties. This is Union shattered units. And then we'll pan over to show you Confederate shattered units. So you can see 2 of Early's very strong brigades were shattered in that combat. It was quite costly, but they did, as I said, gain control of that area. And what they have left isn't particularly strong. I was thinking Confederates could easily advance and re-secure those heights, but I'm not sure if they're strong enough to be able to, again with Slocum's men coming on, and they're pretty strong brigades as well, full strength. There was a very important Union counterattack out here in the southwest. So Standard's brigade had moved down the road and they ran straight into the side of Pender's division. You can see 2 of Pender's brigades also became shattered in that fighting. So that was a good Union sort of victory over here, and a bit of a standoff, I think. I mean, yes, Confederates gained that ground, eliminated some cavalry and a Union defensive brigade, but they also lost heavily in that fighting. Alright, so we're coming to the 10th turn at 6:15 p.m. Johnson's division will head on from the west out here, but they won't reach the fighting in time. I just wonder if the Confederates have enough strength left in their brigades in this area to retain control of those heights. It's really going to come down to, again, the combat activations. You can see what happened here. So the Union had all their activations come out early, and then a series of Confederate activations which let them move up to combat, and they then played their combat chit, very last activation for the turn. So this is the situation just after that combat. Alright, it's on 6:15 p.m, we're heading into turn 10 just now. Okay, it's in the 10th division. Just to give you a quick look at the order of activations. You can see down the bottom here, early was the last counter drawn, and then the Confederates activated their combat chit. This meant that Union forces were able to bring up the units all around Cemetery Ridge and reinforce that area. It also meant that when Early did eventually activate, it was a struggle to get up there. They've suffered... Well, we sent in Pettigrew, we sent in Ramseur around here, and then Avery's brigade here. Avery was pretty lucky. He only suffered one demoralisation point in some pretty tense fighting around here. And then they've advanced after that second round of combat up onto the height. So they control 1. They did lose control of both. They've regained this hex here. The problem is Slocum's men are very fresh and are in this area. And all these Confederates are pretty weak. So it's going to be a struggle. Okay, so we're coming to the last turn of the day, the 11th turn. It's just on 7:30, and it is really going to come down to order of activations to see if the Confederates can reinforce this area, move up into this hex. They would, I think, love for the US combat chit to come out first, or very early at least, to prevent the Union from attacking this area. That is going to be pretty critical, I would argue decisive, in determining the outcome of the fighting on this first day. If we can get that US combat chit out first, get it out of the way, prevent Union forces from bringing up their troops and then attacking, that would be ideal for the Confederates. Now, there is no initiative on this final turn, I think. I'll double check that. And that means that combat basically occurs when the combat chits are actually drawn. The Confederates don't get the option of playing their combat chit whenever they want. Just trying to read through that now. Oh no, they do. Confederates still have the initiative, so they still get to choose their combat chit whenever they like. This is going to be very important again. Alright, so it's about 7:30. It's the final turn of the day coming up. Report back soon. Okay, we're at the end of the 11th turn, and this was a very, very tense final turn. The Confederates threw just about everything around Cemetery Hill. They, at one stage, had occupied a number of these victory point locations, and they threw in so many brigades to support the fighting. So Pender's division helped around here just to dissipate that Union defensive fire. What remained of Rose's division was sent in to help. Early's men were all pushing up. And then I'll just show you the activation counter. This is when they decided to activate their combat turn. Slocum's men hadn't moved up yet. Reynolds' men hadn't moved at all. Howard hadn't moved. And they were trying to seize that ground before more Union defenders could arrive. Unfortunately, I mean, combat was a bit mixed. They certainly shattered a number of Union defenders, but they were also relatively weak themselves, and a number of those brigades participating were either had forced to retreat or were shattered. I'll just show you the Union shattered units as well. And as a result, they failed their morale checks, were forced to retreat, and this opened up all this ground. This was large. Most of this was unoccupied at one stage, and then Slocum activated straight after that combat and moved all his forces in, and then Reynolds activated, Howard activated, and they've re-seized that high ground. This is very barely held. You can see here, this is down to 1 strength point. They have 2 strength points. They're still full strength. So very, very close. They almost secure those 2 victory point locations. What that means is, at the end of the day, we then check the victory points, and the Union have lost a lot of units, about 50, 60 victory points worth. They've shattered 104 points worth of units, and a few other disorganised, for a total of 211 points for the Confederates. Now, the Union has inflicted around the same number of lost units on the Confederate, 56. They've shattered a little less. I think the Confederate total, they've shattered 144 points for the Union, 112, and they have 13 points disorganised. Sorry, that should be a 3. For a total of 181 points for the Union. So it's 211 versus 180. That is not 50% more than that, so the fighting will continue into a second day. First of all, so it's now heading into night turn 12. We'll have to do some rally recovery of these shattered units and disorganisation. There are 2 turns of night turn before we head into July 2nd, where the fighting will continue. Okay, it's the end of the night turn, so I've done turns 12 and 13 together. Just basically a lot of morale rolling checks to see if units recover. You can see a couple of roads. In fact, most of the Confederates have rallied. There are only 3 that didn't, 3 that failed their rally checks, including Perrin with a +2 dice roll modifier, and Pettigrew's strong brigade with a +1 dice roll modifier. Otherwise, most of the Confederates and most of the Union as well. These guys couldn't rally because they didn't have any units on the board. Otherwise, all those Union units passed their rally check. So they get 2 turns to rally. Yeah, pretty good morale rolls across the board, which is really resulted in a very densely packed area. What else has happened? Well, Johnson's division has moved around to Spangler's Hill down here. partly in response to Sickles also trying to move up the hill. We have McLaw's division moving up the road. They've arrived, and way out down south we've got Hancock's 2nd Corps moving up the road. A lot of units, but all around strength 3, 4 or 5. Howard's men have taken up a position on the right of Culp's Hill. Reynolds's 1st Corps is occupying the area behind Cemetery Ridge. They were thinking about moving out to the left here to extend their line down south along Emmitsburg Road. And yeah, that's the situation. So we're just at the start of the 14th turn. It is now, we're just on at the end of that night turn, and we'll continue with the 2nd of July turn 14, 7 a.m. in a short while.